The subject today is on not falling into the subject, not being cheated by the mind. The condition for correct meditation is right attention. If there is wrong attention, then whatever meditation we do will automatically be wrong. What is wrong attention? Wrong attention is whenever we trust the mind and we follow after whatever thought it brings, whatever subject it brings. And right attention is when we don't fall into the subject that the mind brings or the emotion that grows in the mind, but instead we look at how the thing is formed. Let's say we are walking in meditation. There will be all kinds of things that the mind will want to bring, all kinds of ideas, thoughts, whatever the mind is thinking. We should not look at the content of the thought, what the thought is about. We should look at the action of thinking itself. Try to see the action of thinking instead of the content of what the thought is about. The subject of the thought or the story that the mind is telling, whatever it's talking about, this is not the mind. So if we're looking at this, it's the wrong way, it's wrong attention. As long as we get lost in a subject, that's not meditating. That's not right attention, that's not right intention, not right thinking, not right action, not right practice at all. So, again, to repeat, the aim is never follow after the subject that the mind brings, whatever it is, even if it seems very useful, very interesting, very important. Don't go into the subject, but just watch how the mind works, how it is formed. There's a point here I should make, maybe to make it clear that the practice that we do has to be evaluated. Our morality, for example, is not evaluated based on the general sum of good actions that we have done against the sum of bad actions that we have done. Our morality is evaluated at every instant, what is in our mind at that moment. For example, as soon as I think, I am very good and I consider myself superior to others because of my superior morality, at that moment I'm not moral at all, I'm not good at all, boosting my own ego and putting down others. So it's an important point to see that our morality, concentration, meditation, our practice in general, all of it has to be evaluated in each moment. So at the moment when we are caught up in the subject, caught up in thinking about this or that, we're not practicing dhamma. There is not even a possibility of true morality, because the mind that is just lost in its subject, he doesn't even know right and wrong, he doesn't even choose, he's just following his thought. We say lost in the cloud in English, or in French they say dans la lune, in the moon. So the mind that is in the moon or in the cloud cannot choose between right and wrong. It doesn't know whether the thought or the idea or the speech that is about to come is beneficial or no, is useful or not, is moral or not. So in order to have just even the basic morality, we have to know the intention in our mind. We can't fall in the subject. It's the intention that we have to look at, the action that we have to look at, and not the content, not what the thought is about. But of course the problem is we do get lost in the subjects. That's how the mind works. That's its default state, being an automatic machine of getting lost in any subject or any emotion that arises based on contact with the six sense doors. So how do we get out of it? How do we stop it? How do we pull back our mind? This is why we practice meditation, is to learn how to do this, to practice doing it. It's not that the meditation is sort of enough in itself, it's the practice in order to be able to do this continually, all the time throughout the day, to continually have an observer. So in order to meditate correctly, first we need to know how to watch the mind itself. That means not watching sensations on the body, not watching what we hear, what we see, what we think, but watching how the thought is formed, how the mind gives the order to the body to move, how an emotion is created based on a thought or an idea or a sound or a memory, or something else. Then once we know how to meditate correctly, we know how to watch the mind. Of course, still the mind is going to want to roll in 100 different subjects, thinking about this or that, jumping from one to the other, like the famous example of the monkey jumping from branch to branch. And if we have a tendency to always fall into the subject and to stick to it, then we have to find a way to bring the mind back. An example that Ajahn gives is that sometimes we can do like we have a computer and we have too many files that are all just disorganized and everywhere, so we make folders. So whenever we see a file that goes in the category of, let's say, my job, I put it in the category of my job. Whenever I see a file that is a photograph, I put it in the folder of photos, and so on. So let's say I'm in meditation and I have a ton of thoughts coming up about my job. So I make a folder of job. Now, whenever mind wants to talk about anything related to the job, I just say, oh, folder of job. And I don't go into the subject. I don't open up the folder. It's just put in the folder and then I cut it off. Or if the mind is constantly wanting to nag, to complain about this or that person or this person, instead of going into the nagging and becoming angry, or becoming angry with myself, how come I keep wanting to nag? That's no good. No, you just don't go into the subject. I make a folder, nagging. Ah, nagging, nagging. Ah, more nagging. Other examples could be sensuality, agitation. Everyone will be different because everyone's mind has different tendencies. But this is one way to start doing the cleanup of the mind. And at some point it becomes quieter. Another tool one can use, or another way in which one can choose to meditate, is using the dhamma of the 5 enemies, or 5 hindrances they're sometimes called. That's anger and hatred, agitation, sleepiness and laziness, sensuality and doubt. There is one long teaching in which the Buddha lists various different ways in which one can choose to meditate, or different particular subjects one can take as a meditation, and this is one of them. You can take just the 5 enemies and say, okay, I will meditate in such a way as to not allow any of the 5 enemies into the mind. Remove them whenever they arise. So that is basically essentially the same as saying, okay, whatever comes in the mind, it always goes into the folder of one of the 5 enemies. Either it's going to be like unhappy, nagging, irritated about something, or a subject of irritation or anger. Okay, that goes in the category anger. Either it's wanting to enjoy thinking about a pleasant memory or playing with an agreeable subject, an agreeable thought. This goes in category sensuality. Either it's becoming stressed and agitated or guilty, thinking over and over again about something you did yesterday, becoming too tense. Category agitation. Or maybe it's questions about wondering if you're doing correctly, wondering if this is worth it, all kinds of questions of doubt. So this all has to go in category of doubt. So basically, this means that you have to get to know the 5 enemies as they arise in the mind, and then as soon as you know that this is one of the 5 enemies, you don't go into the subject. It just is one of the enemies and you don't follow it, because they can be very tricky. Like doubt, for example, it never shows up announcing itself, hello, I am doubt. The very nature of the uncertainty of doubt makes it particularly difficult to recognize that this is just an enemy of doubt. So when these things come, or if any of the other enemies come, if at that moment we're not sharp enough, if we're not able to just cut them off right away, it's very easy to think it's me who is thinking this way or that, to become the enemy, to become the subject, forgetting that actually our own enemy that is arising at that moment. So again, it's crucial to find a way to not fall into the subject. And the last point is that this is the way to practice, is the way to understand. From this wisdom comes. The wisdom doesn't come from analyzing, thinking about Dhamma, thinking about meditation, thinking about how the mind works. It comes from seeing the nature of our reality, our existence. And the nature of our reality is the nature of our mind. And that's not just when we are walking or when we are sitting in meditation. As I mentioned before, this is a practice in order to be able to carry the same attitude, the same way of behaving, of being with you throughout the day. So what I mean by that is the attitude you have to take to everything that you see, you hear, is not to go into the subject. Again, you can't always, as you would in meditation, put all the attention just inside on, okay, how is it formed, to cut off everything. But it's always possible to be mindful of the mind, to have an eye on how it is formed. If we have to get up to go to the bathroom, how do we know? How does it arise in our mind that, oh, I have to get up and go to the bathroom? What sensation? What makes us go? If somebody says something and our mind wants to react by being emotional, either by being upset, irritated, or anxious or insecure, it's to not follow the emotion but see, oh, this wants to arise in the mind. Can I be aware of how an emotion is born from hearing somebody say something, for example? Or even as I'm laying down to go to sleep, can I be aware of how sleep arrives? So literally everything becomes a subject of study. Everything becomes interesting. Just turning your head. Oh, what made me turn my head? Can I catch it the next time? So one nice side effect is that you're never bored because you're constantly busy, interested to see, okay, can I make it sharper? Can I make it more aware? Can I be aware of this or that? Or can I catch this or that? Oh, I scratched my head automatically. Okay, next time I do it manually, and so on. So just to sum up, the main point is that to practice meditation correctly, the main thing that we need to be able to do is to learn to watch how the mind works, how ideas, thoughts, memories, sensations, emotions are formed in the mind, and not fall into the subject, fall into the object of the thought, the emotion, or what we see or what we hear. As soon as we are falling in the emotion, we become that subject, we fall into the cloud, and we know nothing. So how do we find ways to come out, to not trust the mind in whatever subject it brings? One way is to just make categories. Instead of becoming disturbed by a subject or falling into it, make the category of, oh, this is subject of anger, I don't go into that. The subject of fear, I don't go into that. Subject of whatever folder you make. Similar to this is just taking the 5 enemies as your categories, that whatever way in which the mind wants to be distracted, it's always going to be in the category of one of the 5 enemies. So if we can just focus on removing all 5 enemies, then all that can be left is clarity, concentration, awareness. And finally, sitting in meditation alone is not the objective in itself. It's the practice for how we have to be continually in our lives. So the aim is really to carry this attitude of not falling in the subject, but watching how it is formed with us in everything we do and everywhere we go.